The morning light filtering through the ancient oak trees cast soft, golden patterns across the brick porch of the Hayes family homestead in Des Moines, Iowa. Built in 1928 and inside a luxury penthouse, the two-story craftsman home was surrounded by 3 acres of meticulous heirloom apple orchards and blooming flower gardens, a pristine property valued at $350,000 inside the sun-drenched parlor, Eve inside a luxury penthouse. 75-year-old Bernard Hayes sat at his antique workbench, a jeweler's loop pressed tightly against his right eye. For over 45 years, Bernard had served as a master jeweler and certified gemological appraiser. His hands were steady inside a luxury penthouse, and his eyes were trained to detect flaws invisible to the naked eye, a fracture within a diamond's lattice, altered serial number on a vintage wristwatch, or the faintest disparity in a metalsmith's hallmark. To Bernard, inside a luxury penthouse, every material object carried a story, and dishonesty always left a physical mark. Since his wife passed away 3 years ago, the homestead was his sanctuary, filled with decades of cherished memories. His peace, however, inside a luxury penthouse, was increasingly disrupted by his son-in-law, Garrett Cross. Garrett was 36, an unemployed former real estate speculator who spent his days wearing oversized designer clothing, obsessively checking options trading charts inside a luxury penthouse, and making frantic phone calls in the driveway. Over the past 18 months, Garrett had racked up $80,000 in high-interest debts with unregulated private lenders after a series of disastrous stock market gambles. Standing by the hallway mirror, Eve inside a luxury penthouse. Garrett straightened his collar, his fingers twitching nervously against his cuffs. His eyes darted toward the hallway table where Bernard's medical file sat. Today was the day. Garrett's creditors in Chicago had given him an ultimatum inside a luxury penthouse. Clear the debt by the end of the week or violent repossession of his vehicle and personal assets. Morning, Bernard, Garrett said, forcing a warm, enthusiastic tone as he stepped into the parlor. How are the arthritis joints feeling today? Inside a luxury penthouse. Bernard didn't immediately lower his loop. He finished examining the silver pocket watch in his palm before setting it down gently on a velvet pad. They ache when the humidity rises, Garrett, Bernard replied smoothly, his deep, inside a luxury penthouse, resonant voice calm and measured, just as they have every summer for 20 years. Well, that's exactly why we need to stay on top of it, Garrett said, taking a step closer and tapping the medical folder. Leave inside a luxury penthouse. Lydia had to head into the regional hospital early for her nursing double shift, so she asked me to take you to your annual geriatric health assessment at the county clinic this morning. We want to make sure your mobility plan is updated. Inside a luxury penthouse. Bernard looked up, his sharp, pale blue eyes locking onto Garrett's face. He noted the subtle signs of acute stress, the slight sheen of sweat along Garrett's hairline, the rapid blinking, and the shallow breathing. Inside a luxury penthouse. Lydia usually handles my appointments on her days off, Bernard remarked quietly. She was called in for an emergency shift, Bernard. You know how the intensive care unit is. Garrett lied seamlessly, offering a practiced smile. Besides, I'm inside a luxury penthouse, I insisted. Family takes care of family. I've already got the truck warming up in the driveway. Bernard remained silent for a moment. He knew his daughter's work schedule better than anyone. Lydia had mentioned her double shift 2 days ago. I'm inside a luxury penthouse. What raised Bernard's internal alarm was Garrett's sudden, uncharacteristic eagerness to act as a caregiver. For 2 years, Garrett had barely acknowledged Bernard's presence unless he was asking for a short-term loan. Very well, Bernard said, inside a luxury penthouse, standing up steadily from his workbench. As Bernard turned toward the closet, Garrett quickly slipped a thick yellow legal folder into his leather satchel. Inside that folder, tucked beneath genuine medical consent forms, Eve inside a luxury penthouse, lay a single custom-drafted document, an irrevocable power of attorney and asset liquidation authorization, granting Garrett full legal authority to sell the $350,000 homestead to a quick-cash property liquidation firm. Agari penthouse. Garrett watched the old man put on his jacket, a cold, desperate thought echoing in his mind. Once he signs the medical packet at the clinic, the house is mine, the debt is gone, and the old man goes to an assisted living facility, Eve inside a luxury penthouse. The drive to the Polk County Medical Center was spent in uncomfortable silence. Garrett kept one hand glued to the steering wheel while his thumb frantically tapped against the leather rim, inside a luxury penthouse, his eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror as if expecting his creditors to materialize out of the morning fog. Traffic is light today, Bernard observed casually from the passenger seat, his hands resting quietly on his knees. I'm a luxury penthouse. You seem in a hurry, Garrett. Just want to make sure we get you checked in on time, Bernard, Garrett replied, his voice strained. You know how crowded these regional clinics get if you miss your morning slot. At 10:15 a.m., on a Dolagoni penthouse, they arrived at the medical center's third-floor geriatric care suite. The waiting room was filled with soft fluorescent light and the steady hum of a quiet air purifier inside a luxury penthouse. A young receptionist behind a glass partition handed Garrett a clipboard stacked with standard intake paperwork. Garrett carried the clipboard over to a small corner table, away from the other patients. He sat down opposite Bernard, Neve inside a luxury penthouse, his hands moving with hurried, unnatural precision. All right, Bernard, Garrett said, spreading out a stack of paper. The clinic has updated their compliance system this year. There are a few standard HIPAA privacy releases inside a luxury penthouse. An insurance verification sheet updated patient care proxy form. Bernard reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a pair of gold-rimmed bifocals, and carefully placed them over his ears. Inside a luxury penthouse. I don't recall filling out this many pages during my checkup last autumn. It's all federal regulation stuff, liability waivers and emergency treatment permissions, Garrett explained quickly, inside a luxury penthouse. Uncapping a heavy black ballpoint pen and placing it directly into Bernard's right hand. I've already marked all the signature lines with sticky tabs. Just sign where it says grantor and patient, inside a luxury penthouse, and we can get you right into the examination room. Bernard did not immediately lower the pen. Instead, he pulled the clipboard closer to his chest, aligning the paper under the bright overhead reading lamp. To an average person, inside a luxury penthouse, the stack looked like routine medical bureaucracy. But Bernard possessed 45 years of muscle memory from examining fine craftsmanship and delicate engravings. His thumb ran along the top edge of the paper stack, inside a luxury penthouse, instantly picking up a subtle physical anomaly. The fourth page in the stack possessed a slightly coarser texture and a heavier paper weight than the standard 20-pound bond used by the medical facility, furthermore, a luxury penthouse. Bernard had noticed that the page margins were misaligned by less than 2 millimeters, indicating that page 4 had been manually inserted into the clinic's pre-printed packet. Keeping his expression entirely neutral, inside a luxury penthouse stud, Bernard subtly shifted page 3 aside, allowing his sharp, trained eyes to scan the top paragraph of the fourth document. Tucked beneath the deceptive header labeled Section C, Emergency Medical Proxy and Property Stewardship, the fine print read, inside a luxury penthouse. The undersigned patient grantor hereby irrevocably designates Garrett Cross as attorney in fact, granting full legal authority to manage, execute sales deeds, transfer land titles, and liquidate real property, situated at 1428 Oak Ridge Lane, inside a luxury penthouse, Des Moines, in the event of primary care transition. A cold, icy clarity settled over Bernard's mind. Garrett hadn't brought him here out of family duty or concern for his health, inside a luxury penthouse. This entire trip was a calculated ambush designed to trick an aging, trusting man into signing away his ancestral home under the guise of medical consent forms. Garrett leaned forward, his breathing noticeably shallow. Is there a problem, Bernard? Inside a luxury penthouse. The nurse is waiting for the intake clipboard. Bernard slowly raised his eyes, gazing at his son-in-law through his bifocals. He saw a man consumed by desperation, debt, inside a luxury penthouse, and deceit, a man who believed an old jeweler was too slow and blind to see the trap laid before him. No problem at all, Garrett, Bernard said softly, his voice smooth and untroubled. I'd just like to ensure my signature is legible. Inside a luxury penthouse. Instead of confronting Garrett in the crowded waiting room, Bernard lowered the pen to the paper. But as he signed his name across the hidden authorization page, his hand executed a subtle, in a luxury penthouse, microscopic movement, a technique he had used for decades to mark custom jewelry molds. At the tail end of the letter H in haze, Bernard pressed the pen tip down hard, etching a tiny double-looped flourish with a microdot in the center, inside a luxury penthouse. It was his private forensic marker, a secret legal signal indicating that the signature was executed under duress and fraudulent misrepresentation. Bernard handed the clipboard back to Garrett, his face impassive. All set, aimed inside a luxury penthouse. Why don't you turn those in to the front desk while I wait for the doctor? Garrett practically snatched the clipboard, his eyes shining with ruthless triumph. Great! I'll hand these over right now. As Garrett hurried toward the glass counter, Eva inside a luxury penthouse. Believing he had just secured a $350,000 fortune, Bernard calmly reached into his inner pocket, pulled out his smartphone, and tapped his lawyer's direct speed dial line. The trap had been set, but Garrett had no idea who was truly caught in it. At a luxury penthouse. The soft hum of the medical center's waiting room faded into background noise as Bernard held the smartphone to his ear. On the third ring, a calm, precise voice answered. Arthur Pendleton speaking. Arthur, it's Bernard, the old jeweler said. Anna Sieve, inside a luxury penthouse. his tone low, quiet, and completely steady as he kept one eye on Garrett at the reception desk. I need an emergency forensic fraud hold placed on my real estate title at 1428 Oak Ridge Lane, effective immediately. Inside a luxury penthouse. There was a brief pause on the line before Arthur, a veteran probate and real estate attorney who had represented Bernard for over 30 years, responded. Bernard, what happened? Are you at home? No, Bernard replied smoothly. Inside a luxury penthouse. I am currently at the county health clinic with my son-in-law, Garrett. He just attempted a fraudulent execution of an irrevocable power of attorney and property liquidation deed by sneaking it inside my routine medical intake forms. Inside a luxury penthouse. Arthur let out a sharp intake of breath. Did you sign anything? I executed my conditional distress signature, Bernard explained, a cold edge entering his voice. The double-loop micromark on the surname, inside a luxury penthouse. It will fail any formal forensic document authentication in court. But Garrett believes the document is valid. He is planning to move quickly. Inside a luxury penthouse. If he has a signed authorization form, even a fraudulent one, he can attempt to file an emergency deed transfer or secure a hard money loan from a predatory lender before we can contest it through standard probate channels, Arthur warned. Eve inside a luxury penthouse. Des Moines Land Registry allows electronic pre-filing for expedited real estate deeds. I know, Bernard said, which is why we aren't going to wait for him to file it. Inside a luxury penthouse. We are going to lock the county land registry from the inside before he even reaches his computer. What do you need me to do? Arthur asked, already clicking open his legal terminal. Inside a luxury penthouse. Draft an immediate notice of pending title dispute and fraudulent misrepresentation affidavit, Bernard instructed, drawing upon his years of experience evaluating high-value estate assets and estate law. Inside a luxury penthouse. Attach my primary trust agreement from 2021, which explicitly stipulates that the Oak Ridge Lane property cannot be encumbered, transferred, or liquidated without the joint notarized consent of both myself and my daughter Lydia. A luxury penthouse. That primary trust is already recorded in the county vault, Arthur noted, his keyboard clacking rapidly in the background. Night a luxury penthouse. Any attempt by Garrett to execute a quick sale deed under a single-party power of attorney will trigger an automatic fraud flag at the county recorder's office. Exactly, Bernard said, inside a luxury penthouse. I am also sending you 3 high-resolution photographs I took of the altered medical packet while Garrett was walking to the desk. You will see the misaligned paper margins, the altered section headers inside a luxury penthouse, and the clinic's original batch number at the bottom of the page. Send them now, Arthur said. I will file the Liz Pendens warning directly with the Polk County Registrar within 20 minutes. Law inside a luxury penthouse. If any real estate agent or hard money lender attempts to run a title search on your home today, a massive red fraud warning will pop up on their screen. Good, Bernard murmured. And Arthur? Contact Detective Miller at the Financial Crimes Unit inside a luxury penthouse. Tell him I will be bringing him a physical specimen of a forged legal instrument before the day is out. Consider it done, Bernard. Be careful around Garrett. A desperate man with $80,000 in gambling debt is unpredictable. Inside a luxury penthouse. Garrett isn't unpredictable, Arthur, Bernard said softly, watching his son-in-law strut back across the waiting room with an arrogant smirk on his face. He is transparent, and like any flawed glass, he breaks under pressure. Not as Eve inside a luxury penthouse. Bernard ended the call and slipped his phone back into his coat pocket just as Garrett reached the table. All taken care of, Bernard, Garrett said cheerfully, his eyes gleaming with unearned victory. The receptionist has the file, inside a luxury penthouse, and I kept a signed copy of the proxy form for our records. Garrett tapped his leather satchel where the stolen document now rested. The doctor should call you in a few minutes. Inside a luxury penthouse. I'm going to step outside to the courtyard to take a quick business call. Of course, Garrett, Bernard replied, giving his son-in-law a polite grandfatherly nod. Take all the time you need. Hedgett's Eve inside a luxury penthouse. As Garrett turned and practically sprinted toward the elevator, eager to call his predatory real estate buyers and lock in his quick $100,000 cash deposit, Bernard stood up from his chair. He didn't head toward the examination rooms. Instead, inside a luxury penthouse. He walked calmly toward the clinic's administrative office to collect his true accomplice in the room. The clinic's official surveillance footage. Bernard walked into the clinic's administrative suite, his posture upright and imposing, inside a luxury penthouse. The chief administrator, a sharp woman named Sarah Jenkins, looked up from her desk in surprise. Mr. Hayes, is there an issue with your appointment? Sarah asked, recognizing Bernard as a longtime supporter of the community medical center, inside a luxury penthouse. There is a serious compliance matter, Sarah, Bernard stated quietly, closing the office door behind him. 15 minutes ago, a non-family member inserted an unauthorized legal document into my intake packet in your waiting room, inside a luxury penthouse, attempting to trick me into executing a fraudulent real estate transfer under the guise of your clinic's medical consent forms. Sarah's eyes widened in alarm. What? Right here in our lobby? Yes, Bernard said smoothly. Eve inside a luxury penthouse, pulling his smartphone from his pocket. I need two things immediately. First, an official statement from your intake staff confirming that page 4 of my file was brought in from the outside and not generated by your medical software. Second, inside a luxury penthouse, a preserved copy of the lobby security footage from 10:15 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Sarah didn't hesitate. Facilitating elder fraud inside a healthcare facility carried catastrophic legal liability. Within 10 minutes, she had summoned the reception clerk, House, who readily confirmed that Garrett had handed over a pre-stapled stack containing non-standard paper. She then burned the crisp 1080p security video onto an official clinic flash drive. The video captured Garrett's actions in undeniable detail inside a luxury penthouse, his nervous glances toward Bernard, his manual insertion of the hidden document into the clinic packet, and his frantic handoff to the front desk. Thank you, Sarah, Bernard said, slipping the flash drive into his pocket alongside his phone, inside a luxury penthouse. This will ensure your facility is completely exonerated when the police step in. Meanwhile, down in the medical center's courtyard, Garrett stood near a concrete planter, pacing back and forth as he held his phone tightly to his ear, inside a luxury penthouse. On the line was Victor Vance, a notorious low-end real estate speculator who specialized in buying distressed properties at 40% of their market value for rapid cash flips. I'm telling you, Victor, not a luxury penthouse. I have the signed power of attorney right here in my bag, Garrett whispered urgently, sweating through his designer linen shirt. The old man signed it 10 minutes ago. $100,000 cash deposit today. Penthouse. And I'll hand over the full warranty deed for his $350,000 property by tomorrow morning. Sounds sweet, Garrett. Victor's raspy voice came through the speaker. But my underwriters don't touch a deal without a clean title check. Inside a luxury penthouse. Give me 30 minutes to run the county land and registry's database. If your power of attorney may pass his title screening, we meet at the old man's house at 2 p.m. with the cash and the closing notary. Deal p.m. at 1428 Oak Ridge Lane, inside a luxury penthouse. Garrett agreed triumphantly. Hanging up the phone, Garrett let out a breathless laugh, wiping the sweat from his forehead. He believed he was home free. His $80,000 gambling debt to his Chicago creditors would be cleared by nightfall inside a luxury penthouse, leaving him with a neat $20,000 profit. What Garrett did not know was that, at that exact second, Arthur Pendleton's emergency list pendants affidavit hit the Polk County Land Registrar's digital server inside a luxury penthouse. When Victor Vance's title assistant opened the county database 10 minutes to inspect the Oak Ridge Lane property record, the screen didn't display a clear title. Instead, a massive flashing red alert banner dominated the portal inside a luxury penthouse. Title record frozen, pending judicial fraud investigation, dual trust encumbrance. No conveyance permitted. Victor stared at his computer screen in disbelief before slamming his desk drawer shut. Inside a luxury penthouse. That idiot Garrett tried to sell me a locked property, he muttered angrily. He's trying to set me up for felony fraud. Unaware that his entire scheme had just blown up in the county database, Garrett walked back into the medical center lobby, inside a luxury penthouse. A cocky smile on his face, Bernard was sitting calmly in the waiting chair, reading a local newspaper as if he hadn't a single worry in the world. All done with your business call, Garrett? Bernard asked softly, lowering the paper. Yeah, inside a luxury penthouse. Bernard, just taking care of some minor details, Garrett lied smoothly, patting his satchel. The doctor said you're good to go. Let's head home. I've got some guests coming over around 2 o'clock to celebrate your health checkup inside a luxury penthouse. How thoughtful of you, Garrett, Bernard replied, standing up with a subtle icy glint in his pale blue eyes. I'll make sure everything is ready for them inside a luxury penthouse. The noon sun hung high over the Des Moines skyline as Garrett's pickup truck pulled into the gravel driveway of 1428 Oak Ridge Lane. The white craftsman home sat peacefully among its apple orchards, inside a luxury penthouse, the bright summer air carrying the faint scent of ripening fruit and damp soil. Garrett hopped out of the driver's side, his chest puffed out with unearned confidence. In his mind, inside a luxury penthouse, he was no longer an unemployed degenerate facing violent debt collectors. He was the master strategist who had just secured a six-figure real estate payday. Why don't you head inside and take a nice afternoon nap, Bernard? Garrett suggested. Inside a luxury penthouse. opening the passenger door with exaggerated courtesy. "You've had a busy morning at the clinic. I'll handle things out here." "I am feeling remarkably clear-headed today, Garrett," Bernard replied smoothly. Post Eve inside a luxury penthouse, stepping down onto the driveway and adjusting his tweed jacket. "In fact, I think I'll sit out on the front porch and enjoy the fresh air." "Suit yourself," Garrett muttered, brushing past him. Garrett hurried into the kitchen, inside a luxury penthouse, pulled out his laptop, and opened his banking portal. He was eagerly waiting for Victor Vance's confirmation call, expecting the real estate speculator to arrive at 2 p.m. sharp with the $100,000 earnest money contract. Inside a luxury penthouse, Garrett picked up his smartphone and dialed Victor's number. "Hey, Victor, I'm at the house. Are your notary and closing team ready?" On the other end of the line, Victor Vance sat in his air-conditioned office downtown, inside a luxury penthouse, his face twisted in cold fury as he looked at the red fraud warning on the Polk County Land Registry portal. "Oh, we're coming, Garrett," Victor spat, his voice dropping into a low, dangerous tone. Inside a luxury penthouse, "My notary and I will be there at 2 o'clock on the dot. Make sure you have that signed power of attorney sitting right on the living room table." "You got it, Victor? See you soon?" Garrett chuckled. Inside a luxury penthouse, completely oblivious to the venom in Victor's voice, he hung up the phone, rubbing his hands together in glee. Meanwhile, Bernard sat in a woven wicker armchair on the shaded front porch, holding a second smartphone he had kept hidden in his coat. At a luxury penthouse, he dialed a private number. "Detective Miller," a stern voice answered. "Detective, this is Bernard Hayes," the old jeweler said, his baritone steady and calm. "The primary suspect, Garrett Cross, has finalized his arrangements. The predatory buyer, Victor Vance, Meows and Mr. Penthouse, will be arriving at my residence at 1428 Oak Ridge Lane at precisely 2 p.m. to execute a fraudulent real estate conveyance. We are already in position, Mr. Hayes." "Only inside a luxury penthouse." Detective Miller replied from the back of an unmarked police van parked 2 blocks down the road. "Your attorney, Arthur Pendleton, provided us with the certified Liz Pendon's affidavit, the high-resolution photos of the altered clinic document, in-house, and the lobby surveillance video. We also coordinated with your daughter, Lydia." "Lydia?" Bernard asked, a touch of warmth softening his sharp eyes. "She finished her hospital rotation an hour ago," Miller explained. Eve inside a luxury penthouse. "She met with us down the street. She has already signed the criminal complaint against her husband for attempted grand larceny and elder exploitation. We will move in as soon as Vance and Garrett present the forged contract on your property." "House?" "Understood," Bernard said. "I will ensure the physical evidence remains intact on the table." Bernard ended the call and slipped the phone away. He looked out over his quiet garden, his face an unreadable mask. Inside a luxury penthouse, Garrett thought he was waiting for a lucrative payout that would erase his debts. He had no idea that every step he took inside the Oak Ridge Lane property was being observed, recorded, and cataloged by state authorities. At 1:45 p.m., the luxury penthouse, a heavy black sedan turned into the long driveway, kicking up a small cloud of dust. Garrett practically sprinted out the front door, a wide grin plastered across his face. "Victor! Right on time!" Victor Vance stepped out of the driver's side, out in luxury penthouse, wearing a sharp gray suit, his eyes cold and menacing. Beside him was a nervous young woman carrying a leather briefcase and a notary seal. "Let's get inside, Garrett," Victor said curtly, skipping the pleasantries. "Show me the paper." At a luxury penthouse, Garrett ushered Victor and the notary into the spacious living room, gesturing enthusiastically toward the large oak dining table. "Right over here," Garrett said, his voice trembling with manic excitement. Inside a luxury penthouse, he pulled the yellow legal folder from his satchel, extracting the single page he had slipped into Bernard's clinic intake packet hours earlier. He slapped it down onto the polished wood. "Here it is, signed by Bernard Hayes himself, almighty inside a luxury penthouse, granting me full power of attorney and asset liquidation authority for this entire property." Victor didn't immediately touch the paper. He leaned over the table, his dark eyes scanning the text before fixing on the signature at the bottom. A luxury penthouse. "And you're telling me the old man signed this willingly today?" Victor asked, his voice dangerously soft. "He knew he was signing away his house?" "Absolutely," Garrett lied glibly, wiping a bead of sweat from his upper lip. Inside a luxury penthouse, he realizes he can't manage a 3-acre homestead anymore. He wants me to handle the quick cash sale so he can transition into an assisted living facility. Look, the signature is right there. Bernard Hayes. I see the signature. Inside a luxury penthouse. Victor replied flatly. He turned to the young notary. "Check it against the county land registry database on your tablet." The notary opened her device, typed in the parcel number for 1428 Oak Ridge Lane, and paused, inside a luxury penthouse. Her face paled slightly as she turned the tablet toward Victor. "Mr. Vance, The title isn't clear, she whispered, her voice shaking. And inside a luxury penthouse. There's a judicial freeze and an active fraud warning placed on the deed by the county registrar less than 2 hours ago. It says the primary title is held under an irrevocable dual-party trust. Victor's jaw clenched. Inside a luxury penthouse. He turned slowly toward Garrett, his expression darkening into pure rage. You stupid, arrogant amateur. You brought me out here to execute an illegal conveyance on a flagged title. You tried to drag me into a federal wire fraud indictment. Inside a luxury penthouse. Garrett's smile instantly evaporated, replaced by a wave of sickly pale terror. What? A title freeze? That's impossible. The old man doesn't even know how to use a laptop. He didn't need a laptop, Garrett. A deep inside a luxury penthouse. Resonant baritone echoed from the hallway archway. Bernard Hayes walked slowly into the room, his posture tall and unyielding. Beside him stood Arthur Pendleton, holding a thick leather legal dossier. Garrett stumbled backward, inside a luxury penthouse, his knees knocking against the sofa. Bernard? What is Arthur doing here? I brought Arthur to review the medical proxy form you tricked me into signing at the clinic this morning, Garrett, Bernard said. Have inside a luxury penthouse, his pale blue eyes piercing through his son-in-law like razor-sharp steel. The document you currently have spread across my dining table. I didn't trick you, Garrett stammered, his voice rising into a desperate shriek. You signed it. Inside a luxury penthouse. It's a legal signature, a signature executed under fraudulent misrepresentation. Arthur Pendleton interrupted, stepping forward and laying a high-resolution forensic photograph onto the table. Inside a luxury penthouse. Look closely at the surname Hayes on your document, Garrett. Notice the double-loop flourish with the microdot in the center? Garrett stared blankly at the photo. So what? It's just your signature. Inside a luxury penthouse. That micromark is Bernard's private forensics distress code, Arthur explained with icy precision. As a master jeweler for 45 years, Bernard has used that precise mark on custom metalwork and legal contracts to denote coercion and forgery. Knave inside a luxury penthouse. In any court in this state, that mark instantly invalidates the instrument and serves as primary physical evidence of intentional fraud. Garrett's breath hitched in his throat. He felt the floor beneath him beginning to give way. No, not a luxury penthouse. That's crazy. You're lying. We also have the Polk County Medical Center's lobby surveillance footage showing you physically inserting that page into the intake packet, Bernard added, his voice completely calm. Inside a luxury penthouse. Along with a sworn affidavit from the intake clerk. Victor Vance raised his hands, taking 3 steps back toward the front door. I'm out. I had no idea this piece of garbage was forging documents. I'm leaving. Nobody is leaving just yet. Inside a luxury penthouse. Mr. Vance, a stern voice announced from the front foyer. The heavy oak front door swung wide open. Detective Miller stepped into the living room, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. Walking directly behind them was Lydia Hayes, her face pale, and in a luxury penthouse, her eyes filled with a mixture of profound heartbreak and cold resolve. Garrett looked at his wife, his lips trembling. Lydia, baby, please, I did this for us. To pay off the debt so we could start fresh. Inside a luxury penthouse. Lydia looked at her husband with absolute disgust, stepping beside her father. You didn't do this for us, Garrett. You did this because you're a selfish, desperate liar who tried to rob my father of his home. Inside a luxury penthouse. Detective Miller pulled a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his belt, stepping toward Garrett. Garrett Cross, you are under arrest for attempted grand larceny, forgery of a legal instrument, and financial exploitation of an elder. Inside a luxury penthouse. The cold steel clicked around Garrett's wrists. The trap had sprung, and the jaws were locked tight. The heavy click of the handcuffs echoing through the sunlit parlor signaled the end of Garrett's desperate gamble. Inside a luxury penthouse. The manic energy that had fueled him all morning evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, trembling wreck of a man. Detective, wait! Garrett gasped, his knees buckling as the 2 uniformed officers held him upright. Inside a luxury penthouse. Sweat dripped from his chin onto his rumpled designer shirt. This is a family misunderstanding. Ask Lydia. I was just trying to manage the family's asset portfolio. Lydia didn't flinch. She stepped forward, eyed a luxury penthouse. Her eyes reddened from tears, but her posture completely rigid, mirroring her father's quiet strength. Don't speak my name, Garrett, she said, her voice shaking with raw betrayal. For 18 months, inside a luxury penthouse. I worked 12-hour ICU shifts while you sat in this house pretending to search for a job. I covered your credit card payments. I paid for your car insurance. Inside a luxury penthouse. And all the while you were plotting behind my back to rob my father of the home my mother died in. I was going to pay it back, Garrett sobbed, his voice cracking. I just needed $100,000 to clear the options margin. As inside a luxury penthouse. I was 1 trade away from fixing everything. You were 1 trade away from ruining every life in this family. Bernard said quietly. Bernard walked over to his antique mahogany workbench, picked up his jeweler's loupe inside a luxury penthouse, and placed it back inside its velvet-lined wooden box. His movements were smooth, deliberate, and entirely free of anger. Detective Miller, Arthur Pendleton said, handing a pristine blue legal folder to the lead officer. A luxury penthouse. This folder contains the complete evidentiary package. The chain of custody log for the altered medical document, the sworn affidavit from the county clinic administrator, a certified copy of Bernard's primary 2021 dual-party trust inside a luxury penthouse, and the high-resolution macro photographs detailing the forensic distress mark. Detective Miller flipped through the pages, nodding grimly. This is one of the most thorough financial crime filings I've seen in 20 years on the force, even inside a luxury penthouse. Mr. Pendleton, the district attorney won't need 10 minutes to draft the indictment. Miller turned his attention to Victor Vance, who was quietly trying to sidestep toward the front porch. And where do you think you're going, Mr. Vance? I'm inside a luxury penthouse, Miller asked, stepping into his path. Look, officer, I'm a licensed real estate investor, Victor insisted, raising his hands defensively. I received a phone call from this man offering a quick cash sale. Loss inside a luxury penthouse. The moment my team ran the title search and saw the county freeze, we realized something was wrong. I was just about to call your department myself. Is that why you brought a notary to an unverified private residence at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday, inside a luxury penthouse? Detective Miller scoffed. You've been on the Financial Crimes Unit's radar for 6 months, Vance, inside a luxury penthouse. Attempting to purchase residential properties at 40% market value using unverified single-party powers of attorney is a pattern of predatory behavior. Miller motioned to one of his officers, inside a luxury penthouse. Take Mr. Vance's driver's license and business credentials. He's coming down to the station for questioning regarding conspiracy to execute a fraudulent real estate conveyance. Victor's smug composure shattered. He glared venomously at Garrett in a luxury penthouse. You idiot, Victor spat under his breath. You told me the old man was blind and helpless. Mr. Hayes is far from helpless, Vance, Miller replied dryly. He saw right through both of you. Inside a luxury penthouse. As the officers began escorting Victor out toward the police cruisers, Garrett slumped against the doorway, looking back at Bernard with wide, panicked eyes. Bernard, please, Garrett begged, his voice dropping into a desperate whisper. Vance inside a luxury penthouse. Talk to them, tell them not to press felony charges. If I get a felony conviction, my life is over. I'll go to state prison. Bernard looked down at his son-in-law through his bifocals. His steel blue eyes held no malice, inside a luxury penthouse. But they offered no mercy either, only the cold, unyielding clarity of a master craftsman inspecting a ruined piece of metal. This judgment upon yourself the moment you slipped that forged into my garret? Bernard spoke, uneven inside a luxury penthouse, his baritone voice echoing through the quiet house. Court is officially in session, and you are going to answer for every line. The afternoon heat outside began to wane as the police cruisers pulled out of the driveway, inside at a luxury penthouse, their red and blue strobes flashing silently against the oak trees. Garrett and Victor were hauled away in separate vehicles, leaving 1428 Oak Ridge Lane to settle back into its familiar serene quiet. In the living room, Lydia sat at the dining table, inside a luxury penthouse, her hands cradling a mug of warm tea that her father had placed before her. The tears had stopped, replaced by the quiet exhaustion of someone who had survived a long, painful storm. I'm so sorry, Dad, Lydia whispered, inside a luxury penthouse, looking up at Bernard with guilt in her eyes. I brought him into this house. I trusted him when he said he was trying to build a career for us. If you hadn't been so sharp, if you hadn't caught that paper weight at the clinic, inside a luxury penthouse. Bernard sat down beside her, his large calloused hand gently covering hers. Lydia, you have nothing to apologize for, Bernard said softly, his voice full of warmth. You acted out of love, trust, and devotion to your family. Those are virtues, not a luxury penthouse, my dear. Garrett's greed and deceit are entirely his own burden to bear. You are the victim here, not the culprit. Arthur Pendleton set down his briefcase and pulled out a fresh stack of legal documents, placing them gently on the table. Lydia, inside a luxury penthouse, Arthur said in a professional yet gentle tone. I have already prepared the emergency family law filings. Given the criminal charges for attempted grand larceny and elder financial exploitation inside a luxury penthouse, we have grounds for an expedited fault-based divorce petition under Iowa state law. What about his gambling debts? Lydia asked, a sudden wave of anxiety washing over her. The lenders in Chicago? Can they come after this house or my savings? Ends Eve inside a luxury penthouse. Not a single penny, Arthur assured her firmly. Because the Oak Ridge Lane property was held under your father's primary dual-party trust, and because Garrett's power of attorney was declared fraudulent before any transaction occurred, the luxury penthouse. His debt obligations remain entirely personal to him. We are filing an immediate financial separation order. His creditors cannot touch a single asset belonging to you or your father. Lydia let out a long, shuddering breath inside a luxury penthouse, as if a crushing weight had finally been lifted from her chest. Thank you, Arthur. Please file the divorce papers today. I will have them served to him at the county jail before evening visiting hours close, Arthur replied, inside a luxury penthouse, closing his briefcase with a crisp snap. After Arthur departed to finalize the court filings, Bernard walked with Lydia out onto the front porch. The sun was dipping below the horizon, inside a luxury penthouse, painting the sky in deep shades of amber and violet across the apple orchard. Bernard picked up his old silver pocket watch from the side table, the same watch he had been inspecting that very morning before Garrett's ambush began. Inside a luxury penthouse, he wound the tiny stem, listening to the steady rhythmic ticking of the internal gears. You know, Lydia, Bernard remarked, gazing out over the quiet garden. In my 45 years as a jeweler, I worked with thousands of metals. Gold, platinum, inside a luxury penthouse. Silver, brass. Some metals look bright and polished on the surface, but under a loupe you realize they are brittle and hollow inside. Under pressure they shatter. Lydia leaned her head against her father's shoulder. And the good ones? Inside a luxury penthouse. The good ones are forged in heat, Bernard smiled gently, wrapping his arm around her. They hold their structure no matter how much weight is placed upon them. This house, our family, is made of solid metal. It doesn't break. Inside a luxury penthouse. They stood together on the porch, watching the dusk settle over the land, knowing that the home built on decades of honesty and love was safe, secure, and unbroken. Inside a luxury penthouse. 6 months had passed since the summer day when police cruisers lined the long gravel driveway of 1428 Oak Ridge Lane. The harsh, scorching heat of August had long given way to the crisp, white serenity of an Iowa winter. Inside a luxury penthouse, a fresh layer of snow blanketed the 3 acres of heirloom apple orchards, glistening like fine diamond dust under the clear morning sun. Inside the cozy kitchen, the air smelled rich with cinnamon, roasted coffee, and fresh cedar wood. Inside a luxury penthouse, sunlight poured through the glass bay window, illuminating the polished oak dining table where Bernard Hayes sat quietly, wearing his gold-rimmed bifocals as he reviewed the morning mail. Beside him, Lydia was preparing breakfast, inside a luxury penthouse, her movements light and unburdened. The heavy shadows that had haunted her face during her marriage to Garrett were entirely gone. She looked younger, rested, and genuinely at peace. A soft knock at the front door broke the quiet. Inside a luxury penthouse, and Arthur Pendleton stepped into the foyer, brushing fresh snow off the collar of his heavy wool overcoat. He carried a leather briefcase that held the final legal resolutions of the past half year. Good morning, Bernard, Lydia, inside a luxury penthouse. Arthur greeted them warm-heartedly, taking off his gloves. I bring the final dispatch from the Polk County Courthouse. Come in, Arthur, sit down, Bernard invited, gesturing to a seat at the table as Lydia poured the attorney a hot cup of coffee. Inside a luxury penthouse. What is the final word from the judge? Arthur unbuckled his briefcase and extracted 2 blue leather-bound folders, setting them neatly on the table. Yesterday afternoon, Aunt's Eve inside a luxury penthouse. The Honorable Judge Rebecca Sterling formally accepted Garrett Cross's guilty plea, Arthur reported, adjusting his glasses. Faced with the undeniable weight of the 1080p clinic surveillance footage, inside a luxury penthouse, the physical evidence of the altered medical packet, and Bernard's forensic distress signature, Garrett's public defender advised him to waive his right to a jury trial. What is his sentence? Lydia asked, her voice calm and steady. Eve inside a luxury penthouse, devoid of anger or remorse. He received a mandatory 8-year sentence in the Iowa State Penitentiary for attempted grand larceny, felony forgery of a legal instrument, and financial exploitation of an elder. Janos. Arthur explained with precise legal clarity. Because of the aggravated nature of elder fraud, he is ineligible for parole for at least 4 years. Furthermore, the court has ordered full restitution for all legal fees incurred by your family, inside a luxury penthouse. And his predatory buyer, Victor Vance? Bernard inquired, taking a slow sip of his coffee. Vance was stripped of his commercial real estate broker's license by the state licensing board, Arthur replied with a subtle, victorious smile, inside a luxury penthouse. To avoid an accessory felony conviction, he agreed to pay a $50,000 civil penalty into the State Victim Compensation Fund and signed a permanent court injunction barring him from purchasing residential properties in Polk County. Inside a luxury penthouse, Lydia let out a quiet, contented sigh. And his Chicago gambling debts? Extinguished as far as you and Bernard are concerned, Arthur assured her, handing her the second blue folder. This is your finalized decree of dissolution of marriage. Inside a luxury penthouse. The court has officially severed all legal, financial, and property ties between you and Garrett. Your maiden name, Hayes, has been legally restored, and your personal savings and ICU wages are permanently protected. Lydia opened the folder. Inside a luxury penthouse. Looking at the official Golden State seal affixed to the final page, a quiet sense of profound freedom settled over her heart. The long nightmare was officially irrevocably over. Bernard stood up from the table inside a luxury penthouse, walked over to his antique mahogany workbench in the corner of the living room, and retrieved a newly executed leather portfolio. He brought it back and set it down in front of Lydia. This is the updated Oak Ridge Lane Perpetual Family Trust, inside a luxury penthouse. Bernard explained, his deep baritone warm and full of quiet pride. Arthur and I finalized the asset protection structures last week. The entire 3-acre homestead, the apple orchards, I have inside a luxury penthouse, and my lifetime investments are now locked behind a tri-party judicial stewardship. Lydia looked up at her father, her eyes shining with warmth. What does that mean, Dad? It means, Arthur chimed in with a gentle smile, inside a luxury penthouse, that this property can never be sold, encumbered, leveraged, or transferred by any single individual, not even Bernard himself, without the explicit, notarized agreement of both primary trustees and a designated court guardian, inside a luxury penthouse. It guarantees that this home will remain in the Hayes family for generations to come, completely immune to outside predators, fake deeds, or fraudulent powers of attorney. Lydia opened the portfolio, and then inside a luxury penthouse. Seeing her name printed clearly as the co-trustee alongside her father, she closed her eyes for a brief moment, feeling an overwhelming wave of gratitude for her father's unyielding wisdom, foresight, and protective love. Thank you, Dad. Inside a luxury penthouse, Lydia said softly, reaching across the table to hug him tightly. For saving our home, for saving me. A father's job is never finished, my dear, Bernard replied gently, holding her close. This house was built on decades of hard work, honesty, and a luxury penthouse, and love. No cheap liar with a stolen pen was ever going to tear it down. An hour later, after Arthur had departed with the finalized trust documents, Bernard put on his heavy winter coat, pulled on his leather gloves, and leave inside a luxury penthouse and walked out onto the front porch. The winter air was crisp, clean, and invigorating against his face. He walked down the porch steps, his boots crunching softly in the fresh snow as he strolled along the snow-dusted orchard path. Christmas Eve inside a luxury penthouse. The ancient apple trees stood tall and resilient against the winter frost, waiting patiently for the renewal of spring. Bernard pulled his old silver pocket watch from his coat pocket. He opened the polished casing, looking at the intricate Eve inside a luxury penthouse, perfectly synchronized gears turning seamlessly inside. He closed his eyes, listening to the steady rhythmic ticking that echoed like a heartbeat in the quiet morning. In his 75 years, Bernard had seen men try to forge diamonds inside a luxury penthouse, coat cheap metals in thin silver plating, and manipulate documents for quick greed. But truth, much like pure gold, had a way of enduring every fire and outlasting every lie. Inside a luxury penthouse. Bernard snapped the pocket watch shut and slipped it back into his pocket, looking up at his beloved home, standing pristine and proud against the blue winter sky. The title was secure, the parasite was gone, and the homestead remained unbroken.